We're going to talk about fatigue, hormonal adrenal. I don't know why they put that in there. Probably there are reasons for fatigue. Hormonal problems, adrenal problems. When I was diagnosed initially with arthritis, they gave me a paper that called Fatigue, the Hidden Symptom of Arthritis. Let me introduce the panelists for you. And I don't know who's who, so we're kind of, well, I know some of who's who. Ann Carey Tobin, MD, FAAFP, family medicine, is that family practice?
Fellow of American Academy of Family Physicians.
Board certified family physician, special interest in integrative medicine, women's health, prevention, health education, medical degree from the University of Chicago, the Pritzker School of Medicine, residency in family and community medicine at the Pennsylvania State. This is Ann Carey Tobin, MD, who has a very long biography and very distinguished. She is a family physician here to talk about fatigue and hormones. I also have Dr. Weisberg. I have too many papers is what I have. Dr. Weisberg is a medical doctor practicing in the Capital Region since 1979, board certified in family practice since 1982, and board certified in holistic medicine since 2002. I am amazed to hear there is a board certification in holistic medicine and kind of thrilled to hear it, and I might like to talk some about that too. I think this is the history of a patient, I think. Are you 51, a male, and have progressively worse pain and stiffness in your neck? No. Kathy Lenka, nurse practitioner of 17 years, BS Nursing, Fairfield University, Master of Science in Adult Primary Care Medicine from Simmons College, 1988. Hi, Kathy. Pat Fallon, we met. Who am I missing? I'll find you. Could you be a pharmacist?
That would be me, Peter.
What? Oh.
That's okay.
You're going to have to expound a bit on your brief thumbnail bio.
Oh,
How's that?
all right. I'm Peter Fallon. I own Fallon Wellness Pharmacy. What I do is hormone evaluations. I try to educate, do in-services for physicians in the area, especially OBGYNs and internal medicine, concerning hormones and how to approach bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Other than that, I do lifestyle counseling with my hormone evaluations and kind of try to pinpoint where symptoms cluster and so forth, and try to look for how this puzzle's put together and try to give advice to people on how to.
You're really absolutely, it seems to me, pivotal link in medical care, and I think people overlook it. If you go to 4 different doctors and they each write a script and they come to you, you really are the only guy who's going to see everything and get some idea of what conflicts, what doesn't, what's going on. You're maybe the only person who sees the whole medical scheme.
Well, what I see is a lot of people being treated for symptoms and not looking at causes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you were talking about interventions, I was thinking, you know, what's between health and crisis, and that's where I want to really, you know, look today is what's between health and crisis, because you don't just go from health to a crisis. There's a downward trend. So I try to, you know, identify those people that come in. It's usually perimenopausal or postmenopausal women, and kind of deal with that problem.
Fatigue goes with menopause?
Yes. There's a pretty much a direct link in the steroid pathway, and this is, you know, one of the questions was on sleep and pain, and how does it relate? Well, you know, one of the sources of cortisol, which the adrenals, one of the hormones the adrenals put out is cortisol, which is one of your main sources to take care of inflammation in the body. As you go into fatigue and your adrenals get down-regulated, you have less and less cortisol and the ability to fight that inflammation. Therefore, you have an increase in pain.
It also has a direct relationship to depression.
Right.
Right.
With Ann Carey Tobin, when people come to you and say, I assume you get a lot of patients who walk in and say, I'm tired all the time. Is that the first complaint with fatigue? And how do you start from there?
Well, I really actually see fatigue and isolation. Usually when people come to me, they have energy drops, they're tired all the time, or they have non-restorative sleep, but they also often have pain, as we talked about, chronic pain of some kind, or other symptoms as well. And fatigue really seems to be just a part of a complex
In that case,
issue of
pain is
unwellness.
probably good because it points you somewhere to something is,
Well, it can. I mean, there's many different reasons or many different ways that the pain manifests. I mean, one of the things that we were asked to do was to be prepared to present a patient. And I could do that as a way of illustrating this.
Go ahead. All right.
The one that I had thought about immediately when Mr. Goey contacted me was a 38-year-old woman who did come to me with her main complaint being fatigue and pain. She was saying basically low back pain from herniated disc, but she also had pain up here. And then as we got into more of her history, she was also very concerned about significant premenstrual syndrome symptoms and something that involved extreme depression prior to her menses, which is identified as premenstrual dysphoric disorder. In addition to that, she was having severe migraine headaches that were linked to her cycle. And as we got into it, because one of the integrated medicine practitioners that was up here was talking about the initial questionnaire and the hour and a half that we spend with people when we are in integrative medicine, we started getting into the fact that she's not sleeping well, she has chronic yeast infections, she has irritable bowel syndrome, and a significant amount of issues with the relationship with her husband and at work and a lot of stress. So there's an enormous number of symptoms that we need to work on, and an integrative approach looks at this person in a very holistic way. Mind, body, spirit, how can we address each of those issues? And as we've talked about, we try to look at, try to get at the cause. So with this particular woman, we worked together as a partner, and she really bought into the process. She understood that she was going to need to work very hard on this herself, that I wasn't going to be dictating to her. And we got at what do we need to do nutritionally. So that involved an anti-inflammatory diet, a hormone balancing diet, and what do we need to do with particular supplements that might be appropriate. So we basically we're talking about omega-3 fatty acids, which we've talked a lot about pain and hormone balance in this conference. Getting the appropriate amounts of omega-3 fatty acids on board and the other essential fatty acids like GLA that you get from borage oil or evening primrose oil. A good multivitamin and mineral supplement was important for her, appropriate amount of calcium and magnesium. Flaxseed, ground flaxseed, to try to get some phytoestrogens, and which are plant-based chemicals that are similar to our own estrogen. So a good nutrition supplement program as a foundation. But then we went on and talked about the importance of appropriate exercise. Again, that's going to address the fatigue, the pain, the difficulty sleeping, the stress management. It's one of the most important things that you can talk to people about. And so she started swimming, and she loved it. I also addressed, as a family physician, really tried to do a good physical and get a sense of the manifestation of her pain, and some of that manifestation was seen in putting all of her stress and tension right up in here in the upper back and neck. We see that all the time. Most of us probably deal with that on a regular basis.
some of the headache cause then too?
Well, it certainly could be one of the triggers for her migraine headaches. So I got her from a truly integrative perspective. I said, what complementary therapists are out there that might be able to help you? So she saw a chiropractor, and she got regular massage therapy. And we also talked about acupuncture, which she didn't actually pursue, but it was one of our options because there's a lot of good studies showing that acupuncture can be very helpful in chronic pain. In addition, I talked about energy work for her. as a way of addressing, again, the whole issue of the mind, body, and
I
spirit.
think her physical condition was in part responsible for the problems with the husband within the marriage, the fatigue and the...
Certainly when somebody is not well, that's going to affect all aspects of their life. But we also talked about the use of bioidentical progesterone for her. And since this is a panel on hormones, that's one of the reasons I actually thought about her. And it wasn't the immediate intervention. We laid down the foundation. We worked on the most important things, which was going to basically change her lifestyle and allow her to, move gracefully into aging and to obtain optimal wellness. And that
At
meant
38, isn't she young to be needing hormonal replacement?
Well, I'm not talking about replacement, I'm talking about therapy as a
Right.
therapeutic intervention. And again, there's many people here who use hormones and are probably much more of an expert on this than I am. But with her, I did get a saliva test to get a baseline, looking at what her progesterone and estrogen levels were. And then we supplemented the progesterone to bring her progesterone up during the time leading up to her menses.
Let me ask Dr. Weisberg why adrenal is listed with, it says fatigue, hormonal, adrenal. What's the relationship of adrenal?
Well, the adrenal glands actually are really three glands in one, at least. They produce three sets of hormones. You have the cortex of the adrenal gland, which produces cortisol and related hormones. You have the medulla, which produces the epinephrine or adrenaline. And you have the very surface, which produces aldosterone, which helps to manage salt balance and water balance. The adrenals basically are involved with your response to stress of any sort, good stress and bad stress. We all need stress to live. It also is involved with your metabolism very much. When people are under a lot of stress, whether it's due to illness, whether it's due to their thought patterns, whether it's due to other factors, the adrenals are called to put out their hormones in larger amounts. And what happens when someone doesn't have good nutritional background and good levels of exercise in their lives and other factors sometimes just overwhelming stress, the adrenals become depleted. And the end result often is a fatigue situation, a kind of an apathetic, low resiliency kind of fatigue, which has actually been called adrenal fatigue.
Is there a natural solution to that? There's
Yes.
probably drugs that you could give, adrenal hormones. But
As Dr. Tobin was speaking with, and earlier Dr. Compagne, you have to take a whole person. The integrative medicine approach really is a whole person approach. You have to look at the physical aspects very carefully, the energetic aspects, the emotional aspects, the mental aspects. What is the type of stress pattern a person is dealing with? How can we defuse the stress? How can we change the lifestyle so that life and existence isn't as stressful?
what did you mean when you said good stress?
Well, without stress, nothing happens. Stress, in other words, stress is the internal response that you have. Hans Selye first applied the term stress to biological systems. Before that, it was an engineering term, a
right.
physics term. You put stress on a metal of a bridge and eventually it might collapse. The idea is life experiences induce a reaction, a response. There's a give and take all the time. Some of this is necessary. If you don't bear weight on your bones, they thin out and eventually break. Weight-bearing activity is what keeps the bones strong. That's stress. However, if you jump from a 100-foot height and land on your feet, you're going to break those bones. So that's the same
Right.
idea with life experiences. You need a certain amount in order to live. You give the body the message, I have a reason for being here. And then after a while, that builds up to the point where, gee, it's not so good being here, and I'm having problems. And that's what it amounts to. Just to finish the question, I'm sorry. The approaches often will be nutritional, doing things that will help to support adrenal function, very often using megavitamin therapy or large doses of certain vitamins, which are known to be involved in the synthesis of these hormones. It is often using glandular extracts from adrenals of animals sometimes that have certain factors that support adrenal function. It is often use of herbal substances which can also stimulate adrenal function and stimulate the energy flow in the body. And sometimes it even involves use of low-dose cortisol replacement therapy or hydrocortisone replacement therapy in the extreme cases. So there's a whole spectrum of things we go to. And there are also energetic approaches such as acupuncture, which can be very useful as
Do
well.
any of you ever recommend a psychiatry or psychologist therapy to reduce stress? Is that a,
That's
Kathy?
what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry I cut you off. You wanted to say something?
I just,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a point about fatigue for possibly the purpose of the audience, that we need to be thinking, and we do clinically, I'm sure, distinguish between fatigue and sleepiness.
Right.
Right.
And I'm sure we all think about that patients will confuse, they'll think that they're sleepy when in fact they're fatigued, they'll think they're fatigued when in fact they're sleepy. And part of that sleep evaluation is taking a look at what's the difference, because you can be extremely fatigued and very alert, or you can be very sleepy and not fatigued. And so there's a real difference there that really impacts how we look from an assessment perspective, but also how you experience it as a patient. So part of what we're doing in terms of assessing a patient and working with the patient and doing the psych pieces is that we're also educating them as to how to talk about it and understand what they're experiencing physically, psychologically, and socially.
Let me get Kathy in. Where do you see fatigue and how do you deal with it? Where are you encountering it?
My practice is a family practice, and I see many women with hormone imbalance and fatigue, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia issues, so hypothyroidism. Fatigue is probably a complaint that is a part of more than 50% of the people that I see. And so,
Is it most often hormonal or an imbalance then of some sort?
I think hormonal imbalance is extremely common, more common than one might think.
Is chronic fatigue syndrome a separate disease, or is it a name put on a bunch of...
I think it's a bigger stress.
Depends on who you talk to.
A big, how far the adrenals have gone in the
Right.
situation. And it can be measured
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, so.
Well, it's also a syndrome, which means that you can get to it from many different paths.
Yeah, and it was developed as a definition, as a way to research it. So you could define a group of people who had something you could do research with. And then later on, it got an existence of its own, but it really is so variable. It's important to define it, but then you have to move on and say, what are the individual differences, like you were talking about.
Fatigue is that common a complaint? Is it, I mean, are you hearing that fatigue is a
Absolutely.
very common?
Absolutely.
And there's no one cure? I mean, there's no one...
I mean, I would be
One
willing
cause.
to bet that we all have questionnaires that has fatigue on it, and there's hardly a time that does not get checked off on my questionnaire.
Well, then is it a part of life? Is it normal?
I could speak to that possibly. To me, it makes sense. If you look at it in a naturalistic way, what do you do when you're fatigued? You don't do anything. You don't want to do anything. You want to go rest, right? Well, there are times in life when that's a very good thing to do. The gentleman who was speaking before, his doctor told him to go to bed for 2 weeks, for his pneumonia. Well, there's something to be said for that. If you look at our pets, our animals, if we look at they do that when they're ill, when they're beset, when they have to heal, they go rest. The trouble is that in modern life now, we're not beset by the same sorts of stressors and attacks that we were 10,000 years ago necessarily. We're designed, though, to handle those stresses. Now we're beset by our own thought patterns that get in our way, by fluorescent lights that are around, by noise and pollution, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the same mechanisms are there. And so the body is attacked by this. You better go rest. Don't do anything. So you're fatigued. So every illness...
So it's a natural mechanism.
It's a natural
to some
mechanism,
extent,
but
too.
it's just not the problem itself is that you don't feel like doing anything.
Right.
So the question is, what do you do? We've got to look behind it, just like we've been talking about. You got to look behind it. What's going on here, really?
Peter, is some of it drug-induced from combinations that people are taking of drugs that are...
Yep.
Yes, you got to eliminate that as one of the causes, obviously, when you're working up a patient. But one of the things he's talking about there, one of the things in modern society we do is that when we are fatigued, when we've gone through a stress response, we don't think we should go and take a nap. That's a bad thing. So one of the things we got to realize is that the body's telling us something, and maybe a nap is good in this type of situation. And pointing to what he was also saying, if you look at a zebra running away from a pack of lions, and the adrenal response that goes on there, it's a short-lived response the zebra either gets eaten by the lions or he gets away, and he sleeps. But then he starts to sleep with one eye open. And this is part of the sleep disorder that goes with adrenal problems. So as humans, we don't do that anymore. The intellect's involved. We're in the future. We're in the past, that type of thing. That's why becoming present in everyday situations, that's why meditation, qigong, things like this, I try to get people into some sort of practice, yoga, some sort of practice where they're bringing down their adrenals and they're exercising what's called parasympathetic activity instead of this sympathetic activity, which has to do with emotions, desires, anger, all of that stuff. So it's kind of bringing the adrenal glands down and actually puts them at rest.
That's an interesting, do any of you recommend any sort of meditation or?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
And Qigong and Tai Chi and those types of practices, yoga are excellent for that.
You teach it? I mean, most people, I don't think, know how to meditate. So is that something that you teach them how to do?
It's very easy, actually. It's very easy. There's a number of ways to meditate, but basic concept is you're present in the moment. So you just need to find out how that person best becomes present in the moment. Maybe it will be paying attention to their breath, perhaps a phrase, perhaps it'll be a prayer. Maybe walking meditation is more appropriate for that person. It doesn't have to be an expensive transcendental meditation class with rituals that go with it.
And we tend to think of meditation as being something that comes from the East, that it's not part of our culture. And every religious tradition has a meditation approach, whether it's your rosary beads, and it doesn't have to be religious either. I mean, all the folks at Harvard talk about the relaxation response and how to train individuals to do that. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be if you want it to be more involved part of your life.
The other thing I find that people think that they can't meditate because they can't get those intrusive thoughts out of their heads. And the thing to reassure everybody about is that that happens to all of us. With any practice, it'll get better. But what you do when you're teaching somebody to meditate is, again, you find the best way for them to enter into a meditative state. And then you allow them you give them permission to acknowledge those intrusive thoughts and then to send them on their way. And as time goes on, if you practice it, you'll get better. And then again, meditation isn't for everybody. There are other stress management techniques out there that might be more appropriate for that particular person.
Doctor?
To add to that, one of the facets of meditation, I think one of our other speakers is going to talk about that very great depth, is suspension of judgment. And it's not judging, as you implied, that the thoughts come through, oh, damn it, I had another bad thought.
Right.
And it's the idea of just letting that go and being in the present moment, because all you have is now. You always just have now. So one of the reasons why a lot of religions have meditation somewhere in them at some point is because it really puts you in touch with true reality, with the true, what's really going on. Not what happened a minute ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. Not what might happen tomorrow, what's happening right now. In a sense, some people have maintained that looking at pain, is that if you can maintain the present focus, that doesn't have to be there anymore. Similar with fatigue. A lot of times people are fatigued, not because they're worn out necessarily from external things, but because they're fighting internally constantly to counteract something or fight something that's going on and arguing with themselves all the time. And they're constantly tensed up.
Aren't a lot
expecting
of
the
people
next
fatigued because they
blow to
don't
fall.
sleep?
That could be,
They
but it's-
cheat themselves on sleep?
which
They're
comes
forever-
first? Yeah, which comes first? Sometimes I ask people when they tell me they can't sleep, what are you doing instead of sleeping? And very often you hear some interesting answers.
On the computer.
Yeah. What about our climate? It's dark here again. It's been dark for days. It's going to be dark soon for 18 hours or so a day. Does that have any effect on us? Do you see more stress, depression, fatigue in winter than summer?
Certainly with the time changes, I see, and I bet everybody else on the panel does too, chronic illness folks, there's long been kind of a clinical assumption, if not an empirical one, that at season change, whether it's like October, November, April, March, that chronically ill folks seem to have a much more difficult time. Sometimes people coming into the cold, some folks do better, a lot of folks do worse. And certain disease entities tend to be much more clustered in certain regions geographically. So there's much more MS in darker, colder parts of the world than there are in equatorial areas, for example. And certainly depression with darkness and rain. I mean, Seattle is the depression capital of the world.
Well, seasonal affective disorder
Yeah.
is
And,
very well recognized.
I have a friend who's depressed and says it's because of the world situation, but I keep telling him I doubt it. I think you're depressed and you're looking at the world as
Yeah.
kind of a reason to find, but the depression is within you and not, although the world, if you look at it, can be depressing. Are these more depressing times? You get that? Was 9/11 a problem to any of your patients and a continuing problem?
We treated folks from 9/11, from firemen's families, and I think it depends in part on what people's previous experience has been. I mean, for some of the population of folks that we've seen, if they were from a minority background, their response to us was, Pat, the world wasn't safe before. It's not any more or less safe now. I think it depends on what you had been exposed to before, how much of it you saw, how much of it you were actually personally involved in, and what was your history before. What folks think of as, what was your pre and comorbidity before that event occurred?
The sense of the world being a safe or dangerous place is very important, because it doesn't matter whether it's safe or dangerous, it's what you believe it is. And that your body listens to everything you think. And so basically, if you're feeling that the world is dangerous, those mechanisms that you built up over millions or hundreds of thousands of years to fight the tiger or the bear or whatever else is mobilized all the time because the world is dangerous. You see this extremely. Look at allergy. Pollen. Why should you have an asthma attack when you get exposed to pollen? Is pollen dangerous? No. For that person it is. Why? Their body is almost engaging in a kind of physical paranoia, saying pollen is dangerous. I'm going to produce all this mucus and keep it out. And it's the same thing with lots of other things. The system of ours that's set up we talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. The Chinese speak of yang and yin. And I think they have a very good way of talking about it in that respect, that yang and yin needs to be in balance. The outward, out in your face, take action approaches to stress versus the restorative, supportive approaches to stress need to be in balance. And that's represented by our hormones, is represented by what happens in the nervous system, by the neurotransmitters, and by what we think and feel and what we do. So that's you need to put it into the big picture to really understand it.
Depression is really definitely one of those examples where an integrative approach is
How do we
can shine.
find a doctor who's willing to look at an integrative approach? I'm very impressed with what you're telling us. Yes, we have two here, but you go to your average physician and you're not going to get an hour and a half looking at your history.
Well, it is a consumer-driven movement, and consumers are becoming much more aware, and they're starting to demand it. I think it's coming. I truly do. I mean, Bob and I did a fellowship in integrative medicine through the University of Arizona. Others have come through workshops and time and experience. But because their patients want it, physicians are starting to learn about this, and other, nurse practitioners and physician assistants. It's out there.
How did you guys feel about Andrew Saul's presentation? Did you see it? Are there hormonal imbalances that can be corrected by massive doses of vitamin?
Yes,
Okay.
partially. We use high doses of vitamin C, very high doses of vitamin C, and B complex and pantothenic acid when we're treating adrenals. I mean, that's an example of just a.
Vitamin D is actually another example
Yes.
Yeah.
that's extraordinarily intriguing. The thought is it's actually not a vitamin, that it's a hormone or a prohormone,
Right.
and that none of us are getting enough,
Yes.
Especially in these northern climates at the higher latitude. And
Is that from sunlight?
that basically the reaction of the ultraviolet light on our skin actually produces the vitamin D that we need, but because we're wearing sunscreen, because we're clothed, because we spend a lot of time indoors, and because we live in the northern climate here, many of us are not getting enough vitamin D.
Can you put sunshine in a pill? Is there a vitamin D?
Well, vitamin D is basically the research that's being done. Walter Willett out of Harvard, who is a pretty well-known physician, clinical nutritionist, is doing some of this very exciting research, linking vitamin D to dysphoria, depression, MS, cancer, inflammation. They did a study on periodontal disease, inflammatory disease of the gums in the elderly, and gave some of them high dose or higher dose vitamin D and others a placebo, and found that it made a huge difference. So yes, I mean, and that's again where I was mentioning that depression is definitely one of those areas where you can see integrative approach shine. There's another study that shows that a sweat-producing exercise is just as good as an antidepressant in mild to moderate depression. So we get exercise, we get vitamin D, we get psychotherapy. We also get people to understand that, you know, perhaps they're depressed for a reason, and you need to look at that, not just hide it with a pill.
I'd say that everything that we call a disease process often has a facet of it that is a natural process, that is actually a beneficial process somewhere. And the trouble is it gets derailed, it gets pushed past that point, I think, is what, in a sense, what you're saying as well. And I see this as well.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Are there health plans?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yo, we got to get your mic.
Thank you. Are there health plans in this region that are more receptive to covering integrative medicine? And could you talk to that?
There is a movement right now by all of them actually to actually put you in charge of your healthcare dollar. And it's, you know, what you spend in a year you could spend it on vitamins, you could spend it on this type, you could go to any type of therapy you want. And that, you know, I was approached in my business with this type of thing, but at CDPHP I know is looking at it. And a lot of them are just going to start. I think you're going to see Oxford does it down in New York City right now.
Yeah, the idea is that they let you keep some of the dollars you're paying for the premium, so you can afford to go to somebody else. Or, so for instance, you just get coverage for hospital and disasters, and the rest of it you pay for. And maybe you have a discount program where the people agree to charge you 15% less from their fees if you have the card. And another type of plan is taking some of those dollars and putting them into a healthcare savings account, in a sense, sort of similar to some of the the cafeteria plans
Right.
that some businesses have, and you can spend those dollars on any licensed provider or anybody who's whatever it is, they have some limits on healthcare. That's one thing that's happening. It's going more on the western coast than in the east. It's moving sort of like the weather.
The traditional insurance companies, like the traditional Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then some of the other out-of-network type of providers, such as Empire, will cover a licensed physician, and I'm not certain, Kathy, would they cover your services as well?
Nurse practitioner.
I work right now in a family practice, so I am covered by all the health plans. But it's a time thing, you know,
Yeah.
how much time can you spend with a patient and still have the insurance cover you? So.
It's the capitation thing where they want you to move them in and out rapidly.
Well, they don't care how you move them in. They just give you a certain amount of dollars per person, and that's what you have to use. That's it.
So if you don't move them out fast, you don't make any money.
That's it, basically it. You have to decide what to deal, how that works.
Let me thank you all for being on the panel, but particularly note for those who want to find a physician willing to take the time and look at integrated medicine. Robert Weisberg, where do you practice?
I've been in Albany and Clifton Park, and very shortly I'll just be in Clifton Park, not far from Northway Exit 9 in that area.
Weissberg, you're in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a
And
directory.
there's a few pamphlets in
You
the
have a
back there.
directory?
We have a directory with all the phone numbers.
Okay, and Ann Carey Tobin is family practice, integrated medicine.
Well, I actually am doing integrated medicine as a consultant now.
As a consultant.
So I don't take off my family practice hat, but I'm not doing primary care. I'm in Del Mar. My practice is called Partners in Healing. And there, as Bob pointed out, I think we all have brochures and pamphlets in the back.
Okay. Thank you all.
the birds and the bees and old Father Time. It's just to help the mercury climb. La-ti-da-ti-da-ti-dum, 'tis autumn. That's birdie talk. After making their decision, birdie-like precision, turned about and made a beeline for the south. My holding you close really is no crime. Ask the birds and the trees and old Father Time. It's just to help the mercury climb. La-ti-da-ti-da-ti-dum, 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 'tis autumn, 'tis autumn.
We're back, and we're going to discuss, everybody ready? Everybody enjoy lunch? Everybody here believe in God? There's an expression that I suspect is true. I have no beliefs, that is, I know nothing. But one of the things I suspect is true is that we are not human beings who have spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings having a human experience. But I don't know. I know nothing about the nature of the world. I've been talking to one of the panelists here that some of the stuff coming at us at the moment out of quantum physics seems to agree with an awful lot of what I've read of Eastern philosophy. There seems to be a lot more going on in this universe, there's no question about it, than we know. And because we're connected to that, it is part of our well-being and part of our health. And so that's what we're going to discuss in this panel, is spirituality, the role of religion, meditation, and prayer. We have three panelists with us. Reverend Susan Schultz. I think one of the programs identifies her incorrectly as Susan Schwartz. It is Susan Schultz. She is a minister, chaplain, in fact, with the Community Hospice of Rensselaer County. Also has an experience as an RN, a social worker, and pastor of 9 years experience with hospice. Leonard Perlmutter, I know Lenny for a very long time. He's going to give us 3 talking points. He is a professor of yoga. What is a yoga master? Probably a master. Yoga master. Which is I think Lenny's far closer to probably my own personal religious beliefs, but he's going to help you some understand meditation. I do meditate. I find meditation is a way of dealing with the most severe pain. It's the only way when it gets truly, truly bad, because the pain can get your body, but it can't get you when you're meditating. And I do find that is enormously helpful. And Ken Goey is with us on this panel. I think probably Ken's representing more traditional spirituality. He is a graduate of Siena College. My guess is he's a Roman Catholic and probably practicing, but I don't know.
You raised me up beyond. I only took 1 year. of Siena. I'm a graduate of SUNY Farmingdale, actually.
He's a graduate of SUNY Farmingdale
I would have liked to have graduated.
because Siena wasn't good enough. That'll get me in deep trouble. One of I've been doing the panels by interviewing, and I'm lucky in a sense because Susan told me she has a short presentation, and I think that's a terrific way to begin, about spirituality, about religion, and its role in physical health.
That's all?
That's it.
That's all. Okay.
In 30 seconds or less.
My understanding was that we would give a brief introduction to what we felt we were bringing to this group and then leave plenty of time open for questions. And I have been at the bedside in one form or another for over 30 years. Should I move away from that microphone?
It's hard to know what's causing the feedback.
Anyway, my experience has been that over the years, depending on how we as individuals grow, certainly our relationship to that which is bigger than we are also grows. There are some outlines out there of what I'm saying here. I hope you got one. That spirituality is much more than one's ritualization, one's theology. Spirituality is bigger than one's religious tradition. It is more a way of being, a way that we see ourselves in relationship to the world, in relationship to whatever we believe is out there beyond this earth. And religion is one way of living that out. Whatever our faith tradition might be, that gives us one set of language, which we would call dogma, and some rituals, which we learn as children. But our spirituality is much bigger than. It is certainly guided by and informed by, but not limited to, the Judeo-Christian bias that we have in North America. One way to discern one's own spirituality, and you can see it on the bottom of these papers if you have one, but simply it's a fun and interesting and certainly productive exercise to make one's own spiritual timeline. You know, what are my earliest memories of faith? What were the events in my life that changed how I perceive that? Where am I now? Where do I see that going? And especially if done with people that you trust in your life, it can be pretty funny. I grew up a good Catholic girl in parochial school. To this day, I still carry a handkerchief in my sleeve. You know, there are things that just stay with us. My life events and my experiences with that which is out there have certainly expanded that belief, broken down some of those walls, given me new language for some things. And the hypothesis that I bring to you today, because of my experience at the bedside, both as a nurse and as a pastor, and as a hospice chaplain, is that the one thing our culture does not give us, and that is what I believe is a big piece of finding peace and relieving stress in our lives, and that is to embrace the entire life cycle. Certainly we wish to use our hope system, our faith system, however we might name that, to be well and to enjoy as best we can our time in our bodies. But we live in a culture which denies the fact that we're going to die, doesn't use the word die. My husband died very young, and people would say to me, "I'm so sorry you lost him." And I thought, you know what? I'm crazy, but I'm not stupid. I didn't lose him. He's not under the bed. He's not in the back of the car. He died. And so when our culture denies the fact that we're mortal, I think that creates a whole lot of stress on us. Because if our bodies are all we've got, it's not so much an issue of wellness, it's an issue of just not dying. And we play negative ball, we play defensive ball that way. To that end, I must say, in defense of physicians, as a nurse myself, what is our hope system there? What do we ask of our doctors? Fix me. For many, 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 many years, what we expected of our doctors was to fix us. And yes, so death became the enemy. And if death is the enemy and the battle is between the doctor and death, then the body of the person becomes simply a battleground. And so it's up to us, not only to the medical community, but up to us as spiritual beings who are living in these bodies, to embrace all of who we are. And part of that is we are mortal. And as Ed said, the older I get, the less I realize I know. And what I have learned from being with dying patients for 30 years is that there's a huge amount right here that we can't access, that we don't know, that I can't explain. One example, there were two different people, 7 years apart, who didn't know each other or me beforehand, who saw the same being and described the same being standing behind me. Now, if we were to articulate that in dogma, we could say that was a spirit guide or an ancestor or a guardian angel or whatever. The fact of the matter is, I don't know, but I believe. And I think that that spirit world, an acceptance of the fact that at some point we will be in the spirit world rather than the bodily world, gives us a different perspective, and we live differently, and it helps us then to approach the things of the body a little differently in terms of the mechanics or how we do that or how we live that out. That's different for each person. And
Can't religion also be very hurtful? Pat Robertson thinks Katrina may have been sent at America because of our sins. Are there not people who think, I'm suffering this because I deserve it, God has given me this as punishment for it?
G.K. Chesterton has said, God made us in the divine image, and we have returned the favor. We put on to the divine, and I hesitate to use the word God because everybody gets an immediate picture, you know. I think that we put on to the divine all of the human qualities that we need at the moment. God is vengeful, therefore it's okay for me to be vengeful. I mean, this is my own personal faith journey. I am much more touched and moved by the namaste. Here we are.
Let me move to Ken. What's your view of religion? Why are you in this panel?
Well, I hope to give a perspective of a lay person's action or interaction with God.
Mm-hmm. Are you Christian?
I'm a practicing Catholic, and I find that works for me. I think that if I could frame it in terms of relationship, it would be, what is a hallmark of relationship? You have a good friend. How does that friendship endure? What sustains that friendship? It's the fact that you stay in touch. If you don't stay in touch, there is no connection. You've lost the connection. It's not that God is not there. God is always there. It's that I'm not there. I'm not paying attention. I'm not being attentive. And one of the things that I find is if you frame it in that context, in terms of a friendship, and that what a hallmark, just a basic hallmark of friendship is, that you've got to stay in touch to maintain it, or else you lose it. It becomes an acquaintance or a place to run when things get tough and appeal for help. last minute. So I think that's kind of what I'm talking from. This is from my own personal experience in doing that. And I find that, for me, I did a number of different types of things in order to establish my own personal prayer. I tried getting up in the morning. I tried meditating. I fell asleep. I tried writing. I tried scripture roulette, where you just take the Bible and supposedly that's the page that you're supposed
meant
to
to read that day.
Right, I tried that too. And I tried writing. And what I found, what it boiled down to for me is that when I get in my car, I start the car and I start my prayer. Because there's no radio on, and that's my quiet place. Nobody can get at me. Nothing can get at me when I'm doing that. And I have a litany that I go through, and there are numbers of people that I pray for, many of who don't even know that I do that. But that's not important, because that makes me mindful of them. They bring them to the forefront of my mind. And sometimes that prompts me to connect with them, to call them. Now, is that God talking to me? I don't know that that's the case. It's just that it makes me more mindful. And I find that's very helpful for myself. And that I find de-stresses me.
Well, that's the point of it. Exactly. To help yourself and to de-stress and to use your relationship with what you believe to help yourself. Now, Lenny probably doesn't believe in prayer to an external God, but rather to everything's in you, within, not without. Yes?
Well, I would say both,
Okay.
immanent and transcendent. I just wanted to first thank Ken for inviting me. Speak a little bit to this question of, is the God connection important? And of course, as Susan was saying, God, whatever that is, nobody really knows. It's a concept, it's a word, just a way that people communicate. But some people believe that this God connection is important, and some would go so far as to say that it's the most important thing. The purpose of life is to know God. But I would disagree. I believe that the most important purpose of life is to be free of pain, misery, and bondage. Now, if you have a close relationship with God, you have the connection with God and you know God, and yet you're filled with pain, misery, and bondage, then the sages would say, well, what good is this God? If, however, you are free in your own life, in every relationship, in every circumstance, if you are free of pain, misery, and bondage, then what is the necessity for God? The point is this, that if you are free of pain, misery, and bondage, you do have a relationship with God. But then it comes down to, well, what is God? And who are you? Who has this relationship with God? And people have been asking this question since the beginning of time. And those that have been the most earnest in that quest, giving up the charms, attractions, and temptations of this temporal world to find that answer, have come to the conclusion that, as Susan has indicated, we are citizens of two worlds. Now, we're all familiar with this world of name and form that's subject to death, decay, and decomposition. And yet we are the citizen of another world, the world of spirit, of consciousness, wisdom, and bliss. Yoga, the word yoga means union. Yoga is a bridge between the two worlds in which we live. Yoga is based on the same science that Newton called upon to posit his third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal reaction. And we, the human beings, all day long, what do? We're constantly acting. We're taking physical actions, we are speaking, which is a verbal action, and we are thinking, which is a mental action. And every time we think, every time we speak, and every time we act physically in the material world, there's a consequence that can lead us in one direction or the other, can lead us to the health, happiness, loving, nurturing, creative relationships that we all seek in this lifetime, or will delay the prospect, and instead we will experience physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual dis-ease or pain. And if we don't heed the lesson of pain at a low decibel level, it will just get louder and louder until we cannot avoid it. But yoga is a bridge between this outer world of action and the inner world of wisdom. You see, we, the human being, have something that the animal does not have. We have a function of the mind called conscience. The early Christians referred to it as Holy Spirit. But remember, words are just pointers, just a concept. The point is this, that each human being has access to what yoga science refers to as the superconscious mind. When we access the superconscious mind through our conscience, through the Holy Spirit, we don't need a PhD degree to know that wisdom that is coming to us, whether it's true or not true. We don't need a college degree to know whether it's true or not true. We don't even need a high school degree to know that it's true. All that we need when our conscience makes a suggestion to us is the will to serve it. So yoga is the bridge between this inner wisdom and our outer actions. And the theory of the science of yoga is this: if all of our outer actions and our words and our thoughts are a mere reflection of our conscience, the suggestion of the Holy Spirit, then everything we need will come to us in this lifetime. We will be able to fulfill our purpose of life. If, however, there is no yoga in our lives, if there is no bridge between outer action and inner wisdom, and instead all of our actions and our words and our thoughts are based on the stored power of the unconscious mind, the software of our mind that we have created since we're little kids, then if our outer action, our words and our thoughts are based on fear, anger, and self-willed desire, then there's conflict in the mind. And if there's conflict in the mind, there will always be conflict outside the mind. And what is the first expression of the conflict outside the mind? The body. And the body will start yelling at us. Hey, you're headed in the wrong direction. The sages say that pain is very important. Pain is the shadow of the outstretched hand of the divine reality. Pain is the shadow of the outstretched hand of the divine reality, tapping us on the shoulder, telling us that we're headed in the wrong direction, that we're serving the wrong gods, as Deuteronomy would say. So when I think of this, immediately the image of Neil Armstrong comes to view, in that small little lunar module hurtling down to the surface of the moon. And all the onboard computers are reading all sorts of telemetry, sending it back to Houston, running it through these huge supercomputers, sending back information to Armstrong so that he can fire his retro rockets in an appropriate way so that he can have a soft, safe landing. And that's what yoga science provides us, is this framework or blueprint to make conscious, discriminating choices, not based on what the ego is yelling for, not based exclusively on what the senses are clamoring for, not based exclusively on what the tide of the culture is suggesting, but what our own intuitive wisdom is suggesting.
How is any of this useful in creating health or maintaining health? If how do you go to, is there any applicability to someone who's in a hospital bed ill, that any one of you can walk in with your spirituality and help them immediately on the spot?
Really, there's very little, just from my perspective. There is, certainly you can attend to people, but the perspective of yoga science really is about the individual.
Right.
Everything that occurs, your awareness of that person in the hospital bed, your awareness of everything is a teaching. teaching you either what to do or what not to do. That's why I tell people that Elvis Presley is my guru. Because since I was a little boy, 10 years old, I've loved Elvis. I loved him when I was 10, I loved him when I was 20, when I was 30, when I was 40, when I was 50. Today I love him. And because I loved him, I gave him my attention. And because I gave him my attention, I observed the choices that he made in his life. And a lot of the choices that he made that caused him pain were in conflict with my own inner wisdom. So therefore, Elvis is my guru because he is teaching me every day what not to do. And that's a great teaching. And so everything that appears before us, either personally through personal relationships or secondarily now through the media, because the media now is an extension of the mind. And if there is a relationship, any relationship that comes to us, that relationship is either teaching us what to do or what not to do. And it's funny how we're not grateful to these teachers.
If I may comment on that too, I believe that, I don't believe that we go in and help people. I think that's a slippery slope. I think that those of us who, all of us, might have a lot of letters after my name, doesn't matter. I think that each one of us is called to make part of the walk, to make the journey with one another, to be present, to be present. I think if we think we're going to go in and help someone, we're making ourselves way more powerful than we are. And so it is a mutual experience that we have, whether it's you and your physician, or you and your teacher, or you and your yoga teacher, your pastor. It is, I think that again, we need to take ourselves off the hook. We're not as powerful as we would like to be. Well, I take that back. We are very powerful. We are not in control, and power and control are two very different things.
You mentioned
So I think-
the view of death in our society. Is any of that affected, you think, by the dominant religion's view of this judgment that follows death, the notion of hell, and the judgment that follows death, making people view it differently?
My experience is that it is more cultural than religious, because I'm frequently asked when I'm teaching or doing retreat work, do you find that there's a certain religion where the people have an easier time dying? And I know that what they want me to say is, oh yes, yours. You know, people who are Christian or people who are Jewish, no fear whatsoever, they're fine. The truth is, I've worked in New York City, and I now work in Rensselaer County. And the people who seem to approach leaving their bodies with the most equanimity and peace are farmers. Why? They live close to the life cycle. It is an accepted part of what they know. They respect all parts of that life cycle as equally important. And to that end, I must say, I serve atheists, and I will ever be grateful to a beautiful man who I met early on in my experience, who agreed to meet with me. And I said, I'm Susan, and he said, I'm an atheist, you know. And I said, tell me about that. And there was a good 30-second silence, because he said, no one ever asked me that before. The minute I say I'm an atheist, they try to talk me out of it. I said, where do you find your hope? Because to me, faith is basically a hope system. And he told me that his belief was that we come into this body and our purpose is to do as much good as we can, enjoy this world, and also be with others and make life as good as we can for them. Then when our bodies die, they go into the ground and they feed new life.
Well, if he's an atheist, he really can't talk about purpose. There is no.
Well, I'll tell you, my lesson there was not what he could say or what he could not say. He went to his death with great peace. What it did for me was yanked me out of the comfort of the platitude. I could only be with this person and with his wife of 62 years. And I could not say, you will meet again. I could not say, he's happier now, because they did not believe that. What I could do was be with them
in their sorrow and not try to fix it. Simply sit with them in their sorrow, and I will always be grateful for atheism because it challenges me to do without the language of fixing. And whether that is lived out by me by sitting silently with someone, if I get in touch with the transcendent by running, you know, I'm amazed by people that run first thing in the morning. I reach for my coffee cup, and this is my large muscle exercise in the morning. Sitting still is my way of communicating. That's my way. All I can do is try to be truly with someone, truly present, and not judge however it is that they're moving through this time in their lives. And I agree that it's a mutual teaching. I've learned more from my kids and the patients I serve.
I think it's interesting
than I could
that
ever teach.
when you take a look at an atheist or an agnostic, even though they don't believe in God, well, what is God? God is just a concept. But they in themselves, the atheist and the agnostic, believe in themselves. And what yoga science says is that self within you, that awareness, is within each of us. It's part of an ocean of awareness into which gross and subtle objects appear for limited periods of space and time. And one of those objects that come into our awareness for a limited period of space and time is the body, with which we have a relationship, going back to what Ken is talking about. And when we have a relationship with anything or anyone, it means that we have to constantly act. And the theory is that the more our actions are based on our own inner wisdom, that relationship will flourish, whether it's the body, whether it's the husband or the wife, the child, or work. And if not, if our actions are predicated upon our fears and our anger and our self-willed desires, then we'll experience physical, mental, or emotional dis-ease.
I think this might be where we kind of part ways in a sense. I think it's a really delicate line that we walk in being with people to say, yes, we can have power over some things, you know, to use our minds, to use our relationships. But I also think we have to be very careful to not blame the victim, to say that, you know, if we have good enough spiritual connection, we're going to be well. Because maybe we're not, because we're mortal, and stuff happens.
Well, what does that mean, we will be well? Who are we? Who is the I in this equation? You see, that's problematic when you direct that definition of who that I is that you want to be well back to the body. The body is the vehicle. It's the instrument for this lifetime. So birth and death is a habit of the body. The question is, who are you? Who is aware of the body, that has the relationship with the body? So even though birth and death are opposites, there is no opposite to life. Life is eternal.
There's the story of the man who struggled for years to get to the top of the mountain to ask the great Maharishi. Long, long struggle, but he finally gets there, and his question is, what survives death? And the Maharishi's answer is, what's asking?
That's right.
I thank you all on this panel, and I'll leave you with my mother-in-law's famous quote. When I asked her about her religion, there was a pause, and she said, well, I'll have to ask the rabbi what it is I believe, which I just love. Thank you all.
Can I leave a quote from
Yeah.
Anna and the King? It's a great novel about a little girl who asks her grandmother, you know, what is religion? What do you think religion is? And why are there different ones? And the grandmother says to her, darling, you're born into one religion, but by the time you die, you either have them all or you got nothing.
I have just a quick story. The forum is a result of a book that I read that was given to me as a gift from close friends of ours that we met through Marriage Encounter back in the 70s. And they were our mentor couple, actually taught us how to give weekends. And the name of the book was the Purpose-Driven Life, that's gotten a lot of promotion lately. Now, the process of the purpose-driven life is that it parallels the 40 days that Christ spent in the desert preparing for his ministry. And what you're supposed to do is to take a day and go through, the chapters are very brief, and at the end of that period of time, you come to a conclusion and you either say yes and go to the next chapter, or you stop reading the book. Well, I had not taken time to read that, so I took it away on our spring vacation, and I read it, but I didn't do it 40 days, I did it in 2 days. And I did answer the questions at the ends of each of the chapters. And the end chapter is that you be attentive now in your life to God's purpose. And so I came back and I was attentive. And that led me to meet Andrew. I was determined to meet him. And at first we conversed by email. And then I had decided that we needed to meet face to face. I think that's a lawnmower. Is it not? Life goes on. But the purpose in that was that I was determined to meet him, and he was not determined not to meet me, but he later termed it as a Zen experience, that if I came to be at his doorstep, then he was supposed to meet me. And he met me, he was in his shorts, he had been working in the garden, and he said, wait a minute, and he went in to do something, came back to the door, and we went out and we sat under a tree on his front lawn. Neither one of us had met one another. I had only read what he had written and had been to his website. We conversed for 45 minutes, had a meeting of the minds, and hence we have a forum. And that's where it came from.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you all.
Me too.
The headline, though, may be that one of the most prominent car dealers in the area says a prayer every morning when he starts up his car.
I pray for business too, by the way, for a profit.
Okay, thank you. We'll take 5 and be back with cultural medicine.
This song was written by a wonderful musician who was very in touch with his spirit, Mr. John Coltrane, and it's called Naima, written for his wife. and the keeper of the home, and the wife to her man. So never, never, never care to roam. She's love to the child, mistress of rebirth, spirit full of mirth, child of the immortal God,
Anybody watching Rome on HBO? I've been trying to look at their medical practices, if any. I was fascinated by their religious practices and that they're so, at least the characters in that are such believers. I love the line that nothing will happen to this boat. A handsome contribution was made to Neptune. But the cutting of the hands and the dripping of blood in the Jupiter's statue, it's very weird to see a pagan religious practice with such belief. Of course, there's an old saying, the great god Ra, whose temples once dominated acres, is now little more than a fill-in for a crossword puzzle. We're going to discuss cultural medicine, although it seems pretty much limited from what I've read to Eastern Chinese acupuncture, which I have found useful. And I was hoping there were other cultural practices from other cultures that we could include because, as you know, medicine goes back to the very dawn of man, and there are certainly some practices among tribes with medicine men which were effective and which we're just beginning to look at. I think it was Andrew mentioned up first here on the first panel that in effect, mankind's been practicing medicine for thousands and thousands of years, but we rarely look back at what they were doing and look to other cultures and look to other techniques. That's some of what we're going to do in this panel, but who am I missing?
Greg St. Clair.
Where's Greg St. Clair?
Oh.
Well, go give him the needle.
Would you like us to play a song while you're waiting?
Actually, I'm inclined to start.
Oh, you're going to start? Okay.
Because when Greg comes up, we'll include him as well. But you are both acupuncturists. Or?
I am.
Yeah, I am. Are you?
No.
Oh.
No? Oh. Well, then what the heck are you doing here? Are you Veena Patel?
Right.
Hi. Practicing physician, internal medicine in Troy, New York, attending physician at both St. Mary's and Samaritan Hospital. Born and raised in Bombay, India. Her MD degree is in internal medicine from Bombay University. 69, she came to the USA, then had additional training in internal medicine at St. Peter's and Albany Medical Center. Father was a prominent physician in India, practicing in Bombay, worked with the World Health Organization to incorporate allopathic
Ayurvedic.
or Vedic?
Ayurvedic
medicine in India. Dr. Patel will discuss how she incorporates cultural medicine in her practice, also discuss patients who have benefited from herbal medicine, good, when traditional therapy failed. Michael Wayne is a licensed acupuncturist in New York and California, and Chinese herbalist. Do all states license acupuncturists?
Yeah, every state would license
Every state
it by
does.
itself. Yeah.
And so you have to complete a course and show?
You have to go to an acupuncture school, which is a 4-year training program, and then take a board exam.
Really?
And if you pass it, then you apply to a state and get your license.
Greg?
Hi, I'm Greg.
Greg, good to meet you. Well, I just started introducing because we're so behind schedule. I have no hope of catching up, but I can make a little. Greg is began studying Chinese medicine in '91, acupuncturist, licensed again by the New York State Board of Education, but also a practitioner of Tai Chi, meditation, medical Qigong. Qigong, what is that?
They're exercises. Most people are familiar with Tai Chi.
Right.
As a Chinese exercise, Tai Chi is a type of Qigong.
Okay.
It's used in hospitals. Some would say physical therapy would be used here.
And also herbology. So we have two experience with using herbs. Is that primarily Oriental herbs
For me, yes.
for you? Dr. Patel, same?
Yes, no, American, more like American herbal medicine.
But is it an extension from India? Did this start in India, the herbal practice that you're using? That's what I'm wondering. Is
Actually,
it
herbal practices in every culture in the world. Because we didn't have allopathic medicine, so what we did was gave them whatever the diseases were there at that time. They would use the herbs available in the continent and use it and incorporate spirituality and teach the person how to heal itself. But Ayurvedic basically started as a herbal medicine. They incorporate a lot of herbs which are available in Himalayas, which is supposed to be the mine for the herbs. And wherever China has a part of the Himalayas, and their culture, herbs also come from Himalayas. But you see that every culture will produce their own herbs. The effect is whatever the disease they are applying in it, they would use it.
Is this specific disease, specific herb? Or is
Yes,
it more general, you have a
usually.
lung
No,
problem?
usually, yes.
Okay.
Because in Ayurvedic medicine, they consider that there are three types of people in this world. They call it Prakruti. And what that means is that these are the three types of diseases a man can have. The three types are called Vayu, Pitta, and Kapha. And the people who have Vayu type of diseases are mainly affected with nerves and the brain. Those who are affected with Pitta are in the abdomen and endocrine glands. And the people who are affected with Kapha are affected mainly with the muscles, lungs, or heart. And then what it describes is that all these combinations you can have depending on the inheritance, what we call genes. And that is why we tell patients that you can't choose your parents, because what genes you're going to inherit you don't know. But when you want to be healthy, you can control that and be healthy, incorporate in the life. And that is why in Ayurveda they call the three legs of truth. That means that control your health, take control of your health, incorporate in it, and have confidence that you are improving your health, and develop spirituality. So when you have diseases, which you're going to have sooner or later, and to some degree, that you can incorporate in your life and then improve on it, and by taking control, you're going to feel healthy. And this is what Ayurveda teaches. But they will use herbs, various parameters like exercise, yoga. Actually, acupuncture is a part of the yoga. I mean, yoga and acupuncture are all part of the Ayurveda technology.
This all
Reiki
stems
and all
from-
that, these are all the branches which are described in Ayurveda, because it's a 5,000-year-old medicine and it was practiced very widely. But when the Muslim invasions came to India from 2nd century, gradually that art was lost. But even in that Ayurveda, they are describing transplants, fractures, how to take care of the surgeries, and all that is included in that type of medicine.
Are you the only one who practices Ayurvedic medicine here?
I do not practice Ayurvedic
You don't?
medicine, but incorporate in my allopathic medicine and teach patients how to take charge of their life by discussing what is health, what is fitness. Because unless you understand what health is and what is fitness, you're not going to feel better. Because you can take all the medicine you want, but you're going to be frustrated that I'm not feeling better, I'm still tired, I'm spending all the money. And I teach them what health means and what fitness means and how to control it.
Is your herbology then different from Greg's? Do you use different herbs, would you guess, in different?
Probably,
Yeah.
probably.
And just point of clarification, I also practice Chinese herbal medicine.
You do?
Yeah, so you can, I'll put my 2 cents in when it's appropriate.
I assume this is all largely derived of experience from thousands of years of treating with various herbs. Is it modernized in any sense, or is this, in effect, a technology that's thousands of years old that you can look up if it's a PETA-type illness, as she would describe, this herb or another herb? Does this change? Is there research done?
I think these cultural medicines, and I can't speak for Ayurvedic as much as Chinese medicine, but it continues to evolve. It continues to become modernized, concurrent with the time. So research continually gets done with Chinese herbal medicine to understand what are the chemical constituents that are the active ingredients in dealing with illness. There's a lot of research in contemporary China with the herbs that are appropriate for cancer, that treat cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of that research gets filtered into this country, but they're doing a tremendous amount of research with that. A lot of the original textbooks in Chinese herbal medicine that date back hundreds, thousands of years, from what I understand, a fair amount of those herbal formulas that are listed in those textbooks are still used in contemporary times. The wisdom and sophistication of Chinese medicine, I would say the same for Ayurvedic medicine, is just very profound. And so, you know, any of us who practice Chinese medicine owe a great deal of debt to all the doctors who've come before, and we always just are deferred to their wisdom as we try to add to it.
What's practiced in China today then? Probably a mix of Western and old Chinese medicine?
I would say so because during communism in Russia and China, the herbal ancient medicine was banned. And only since 1960 or onwards, it has started come up into the light. It was practiced in rural areas, but now they have also developed universities to purify the herbal medicine, like we have in India, Ayurvedic universities and government grants, where the medicine is produced from the herbs at the university and sold.
You just
And
mentioned
same thing
purify. Is purity an issue? It has to be an issue, but how do you be sure of the purity of your herbs and your...
I don't think they have standard like what we have here for allopathic medicine, but they try to have more of that amount. And like I can give you an example that I had a patient who was having repeated prostate infections, was taking antibiotics for a long time, 8-10 months. By his urologist, he was not improving. And he took over-the-counter zinc, which didn't help him. But when I gave him the herbal medicine type of chelated zinc, which was more purer, little more stronger, and the guy has improved, he's got great sex life again, and he hasn't had prostate infections. So purity, some will maintain, some will not, but that has come up even in Chinese universities and India.
But it's interesting that now you know apparently the active ingredient in that herb you were giving is the zinc.
Yes.
Which probably is a reason. Who figured that out? How does that Western medicine going to look at what this herb is and looking at the ingredients and then?
It's part of it as we incorporate in allopathic medicine.
All right. Talk to me about acupuncture, which I've tried and found useful and which interests me because I have no idea how anyone in the world would ever figure that out. How did it start?
Since I said something, I'll let you go.
All right, Greg, you're on.
How did they figure out acupuncture? The story I heard was that it came from the warriors that were out in the fields fighting and they'd get hit by arrows or stabbed and they would start saying, hey, my back feels better. So they started experimenting, puncturing people. using stones or bamboo or wood. And over the years, they started using different metals, gold, silver, etc. And some people are very, very sensitive to the energy. So when we needle the body, they'll say, I'll needle them in the leg, and they'll say, I feel that in my head. And I'll say, wow, that's where the meridian goes. That's amazing. So what they did was, over the years, they found these people that were sensitive, and they practiced on them. It was ancient China, it wasn't like today. They had not as much to do, so they sat around practicing on these people. And over thousands of years, they mapped out these meridians, which, like I said, I still see people today feel the energy and how it moves.
Well, this seems to me to be more of an exact science than some other areas of medicine in general, even, in that you have specific maps and you have meridians and you know the points, and they are well established.
Right.
Is there any research going on to find other meridians or other points? That almost seems silly, but...
That's a good question. I haven't heard of any
No.
research looking for other
But
meridians.
Ayurvedic literature points all these nerve endings, and it is already mapped out.
It is all mapped
And
out.
this was the part of the Ayurvedic medicine which is supposed to have gone towards the China.
Because it was banned in India.
It got destroyed, or yes.
And
How
banned
did it
in
get to the
China for a
West?
while, too.
Yes, it was banned in China.
It was.
Yeah, in the early part,
Communist part.
in the early part of the 20th century, actually, when the emperor, the last emperor was dethroned and the Republic of China started, it was banned. And actually, Chairman Mao Zedong, brought it back only because it helped him with his own ailment of Bell's palsy. So he thought, oh, this is a treasure,
Yes,
and we
that's
should,
true. That's a
yeah,
correct.
we should bring it back. And so he started slowly but surely
Yes.
putting it back towards it.
It seems to be growing in the West a great deal. Why is that? And it seems that mainstream physicians, mainline, are now beginning to recommend it and look at it.
Well, I could say simply, why is it that it works? It's very effective. That would probably be like the bottom line answer, and there's no side effects, and it's just, again, to me, it's just a profound medicine based on very sophisticated thinking. And Chinese medicine is based on a philosophy of life that sees humans living very harmoniously, or trying to live harmoniously with nature. That's our base approach to life, and that we've gotten away from it. As we get away from it, illness can come to play a role. And so they were always looking for ways to harmonize with nature.
Right.
What I'd like to say is, when most people come to me, they've tried everything else. They've been to their doctor, they've had a surgery, they've had drugs, they've gone to a chiropractor, massage, shots of cortisone, whatever it might be, and nothing else is working, so they're looking for something else. That's one reason why, and like Michael said, it works. We don't have a 100% success rate on everything. We have the same types of success rate Western medicine does. For example, back surgery, you don't have a 100% success rate. Hip replacements, I have people that have had 2-3 surgeries that just keep getting worse. So they're looking for something else to work.
What is acupuncture effective in dealing with? Anything, any physical ailment, or I don't think you could fix a broken arm.
Yeah, I mean, you could actually help the healing of the broken arm once it's set. But I get that question a lot. And if you put acupuncture in the umbrella of Chinese medicine, which includes Chinese herbal medicine or the Qigong that Greg was talking about, I feel confident in saying it's capable of treating anything, but also in the same context as we wouldn't ask, oh, what's Western medicine capable of treating? We just think it's medicine. So in terms of like cultural medicine, in our culture, it's Western medicine. In another culture, the medicine is what is indigenous to that culture.
Well, I have a view of acupuncture as being very useful, for example, in dealing with pain, but could it cure cancer?
No, actually, all these alternative medicines, whoever practices, have to remember 3 basic principles. That when the patient is asking for that help, is this a life-threatening illness, like pneumonia, appendix inflammation, or they're developing stroke or what? Or suppose the guy comes with bloody stools, or he's coughing up blood, or he's anemic, or there's a weight loss. That means that, are you going to do more tests and find some underlying life-threatening illness? Or you have to make sure that there is normal, accepted way of treatment available today in this world. Like you have cancer, heart attack, you have a certain type of anemias like AIDS and all this type of infections, there is an accepted treatment available and this is there. So you are not going to tell these patients that yes, alternative medicine or CAM as it is called is for you. In these patients, when they do take care of themselves with the regular allopathic medicine and they are still not feeling better, then the CAM comes into the play and it works in a different way that you are going to start feeling better. And at the same time, when you go towards CAM, you are taking charge of your health. And more you take charge of your health, you develop self-confidence. And that helps you to develop a little bit of spirituality, what we call 3 legs of truth. And you feel better. So alternative medicine doesn't cure a person, it helps with feeling better. That is how I look at it.
Well, if you feel better, you don't care if you're cured.
Right.
I guess. Let me ask you some about Tai Chi and the exercises. I see Tai Chi only pretty much in the Celebrex commercials. It doesn't look,
amazing, isn't it?
It doesn't look particularly useful in terms of exercise. It's hard to see how it is. Or is it isometric-like in that you're...
Well, many things happen when you do Tai Chi. It's interesting that to be used for a Celebrex commercial is a symbol of health, using a drug to get there. But you know, just like the acupuncture works on many levels, it's a relaxation, it's movement, it induces blood flow. The point of a Tai Chi or a Qigong exercise isn't to be stronger or faster, it's to keep everything moving, the blood, the lymph, keep your joints flexible, it's a moving meditation. And in China, you can become a doctor of Qigong exercises and use them in a hospital just the way you can use physical therapy here in America. So.
Interesting. Is it accepted in that way in America yet? Would a physical therapist be allowed to use it yet, or is that...
Well, not by insurance, and most doctors aren't thinking of it like that, but more and more people are turning towards it. I mean, 10 years ago, probably half the people in Albany didn't hear of Tai Chi. Now probably everybody almost has at least heard of it. Same thing with Qigong. Right now, not many people have heard of Qigong, but it's like yoga 20, 30 years ago. Now it's everybody in the country knows the word yoga. So.
And just to add to what Greg said about insurance, because I have seen, I met someone 2 years ago, a Qigong doctor of Qigong in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, and he said he was working on workers' comp cases and getting covered for it. So I guess the answer is that there is insurance covering it.
One thing is that Tai Chi and Qigong now is considered by the state of New York that in older homes, adult homes, nursing homes, they have to offer to the residents, and they can go to the classes every morning, whoever wants to, even though they may be in the wheelchair, and they'll do exercises. And most of the institutions have to conduct classes.
You mentioned AIDS, which occurs to me as an entirely new affliction of mankind. Less than 50 years old, probably, on the planet. What applicability do ancient medical practices, either herbal or acupunctural or anything else, have to do with diseases like AIDS? Is it still useful?
You know, when my father was in medical school, that is almost, we are talking of 70, 80 years ago, it used to be only one sentence for that AIDS disease in infectious disease chapter, that it is seen only in Africa and there is no cure. But since then, AIDS has become worldwide. And I don't think anywhere I have read which mentions AIDS beyond that.
No herbal application now?
Again, there's research that goes on in China, not to sound flippant that it's not coming here, but not a lot does make it here. But I think AIDS is symptomatic of the state of, in a way, the state of the immune system for the collective whole, that we're somehow our bodies are becoming overpowered by these intelligent viruses that that just can latch on and take over our mechanism, our machinery in our bodies. So I think herbal medicine and I think Chinese herbal medicine and Ayurvedic herbal medicine has a lot to offer because they're very complex formulations that contain a lot of diversity and information and can work with these viral states.
How do you all feel about all the processed foods that we eat and the general intake of in America has changed, certainly in the past 50 years? A lot more preservatives, a lot of other chemicals. Is that a big concern?
Environmental toxins. I read a quote yesterday, said something between, in Canada and the United States, between $400 and $500 billion a year spent on diseases that are caused by environmental toxins. What appealed to me of getting interested in Chinese medicine, Oriental medicine, it was based on how nature worked. It said we're a little microcosm for nature. So I personally believe the more natural you could do things, the better, including diet and food and the air you breathe. It becomes harder and harder in our society as it becomes more polluted with stress and noise and toxins. It just means it's all that more important to pay attention to those things.
Are you a vegetarian?
No.
Any of you vegetarian?
Pretty close. I'm pretty close to being a vegan. I eat some fish, a little bit of chicken, so maybe that doesn't make me vegan.
No, I guess
Mixed up
it has
vegan.
a face, is what I used to hear.
Yeah.
What? So, how close are you think to getting at least acupuncture paid for by most of the medical plans?
I thought CDPHP was thinking about it.
Yeah, and actually, because I work in Saratoga, some employees of Skidmore College who have CDPHP now have acupuncture
Yes,
coverage.
I think CDPHP is agreeing with it.
Yeah, and Empire Blue Cross covers some acupuncture for some conditions.
But I'm going to be reduced to Medicare soon, and I don't think the federal government would.
Are you following there's a law in Congress, it's...
It will be eventually.
Yeah, I mean, every year it gains more co-sponsors, so it's a bill to cover federal employees and Medicare.
Right. Questions from... You have to. I'm out of questions.
Well, I think just one thing in summation, if we're at that point, I think one thing we all agree about the cultural medicine, Ayurvedic, Chinese, and others, is that really at their heart, they're about education, educating the person, the patient.
I have actually a different view. I'm fascinated by the fact that acupuncture seems to work, but it's based on meridians and concepts which seem to be totally outside modern medicine. And I'd like to see Western medicine take a look at the meridians and try to figure out, why does this work? It works, so what is their explanation for why they have to have one, or their medicine science has to explain, or it's no good?
There's a lot of real reasons that acupuncture works. I mean, 5,000 years ago, they didn't have MRIs and ultrasounds, but we know today that acupuncture does a lot of real things. When you needle the body, it brings blood to the area. Blood brings all the oxygen, all the nutrition. It relaxes the muscles. It brings white blood cells to the area because it's a foreign invasion. So any inflammation in the body, the white blood cells part of the immune system. It helps to tonify the immune system. And there's lots of research on using acupuncture for AIDS. It releases endorphins from the brain.
Yes.
We know that, which is one of the most powerful parts of it, because it works on pain. They're your body's natural painkillers. But it also works on the mind, too, because it helps to reduce stress. It also has a hormonal balancing effect on the body, too. And we know all this. But, the research is being done in China. It's been done here. Just one of the biggest studies in America was done by the National Institute of Health on acupuncture and arthritis for the knees. And, there's overwhelming evidence that acupuncture works. So,
Yeah. Even Dr. Andrew Weil has a department for acupuncture in University of Arizona.
You made a wonderful point earlier on, though. I think it works better if you believe it works.
Yes, expectation makes a difference. And you know the story about the two classes where one was told that you have exceptional students and the other teacher was told that you have average students. They were teaching the same thing, same grade. At the end of the term, the students who were told that the teacher who were told that you have exceptional students, they really did very well, exceptionally well. while the teacher who taught regular what she was supposed to teach, they did average. So this is how expectation works. If you feel that I have done everything, but I want to take charge of my health, you're going to succeed. And I tell my patients, especially when they say, do I have to take all this medicine? I tell them, are you tired of taking medicine? And when they say yes, I said, take charge of your health. When you feel that I'm tired of taking medicine and you take charge of your health, you're going to succeed.
Many Western people think, especially a lot of medical professionals, that acupuncture and Oriental is psychosomatic. The patient thinks that it's working, but first of all, if a patient's tried everything else and it doesn't work and I can get them to have a psychosomatic, relief and recovery, I would consider that a superior medicine. However, it's not psychosomatic only. Half my patients don't even believe it's going to work, and after a treatment or two, they're starting to feel relief. But it's done on infants. I do pediatrics. It's done in veterinary medicine, on horses, on cats. It's not a cat having a psychosomatic, recovery.
I hope not. You work on quitting smoking too? I mean, I've heard that acupuncture can be successful in helping people quit smoking.
Yeah,
which I
have
wondered
about
if it isn't
80%
purely
success rate,
psychosomatic at that.
Yep, I have about an 80% success rate with quitting smoking. I've worked with alcoholics, other drugs, help people get off of opiates, narcotics, pain relievers. I'd like to say something about acupuncture.
Yeah.
We keep using the word acupuncture. That's only one tool in Oriental medicine. There's many tools, herbs, massage, qigong, acupuncture.
Reiki.
There's meditation, Reiki. A lot of people, I heard, there's a quote, 60% of people in America wouldn't try acupuncture because of the needling, but that's one tool. There's electrical stimulation, there's tuning forks you could use on different points, there's different things to do. There's magnets. Some practitioners practice in different things, so.
Wow. Yeah, when I was getting acupuncture and it wasn't particularly effective anymore, that she suggested putting electricity on the, that's where I rebelled. Question, yes.
I haven't had a chance to check out Michael's book. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh.
And I'm not someone that was paid to sit here and say that.
But I will pay you after. I've written a book, it's maybe on that back table. It's called Quantum Integral Medicine Towards a New Science of Healing and Human Potential. I happened to give Greg a copy today, that's why I didn't come up here with it. But it's a lot of information, but the book stemmed from my clinical practice, wondering what held people back from healing, because I have the firm belief that we all have the capability, we have an innate healing capability. So I started researching and started delving into the limits of modern science, modern medicine, and how some of these what are so-called newer sciences are really pointing the way towards profound healings, towards the explanation of profound healings, and towards showing us how we can access more of our healing potential. So my book is not really a how-to book, it's really a why book of what's the nature of science, what's the nature of our thinking capabilities, why do we limit ourselves, and how we can take the steps to go beyond that. So, thanks. And it's on sale back there, and I will sign it.
And you'll autograph it.
And an autograph.
Yes.
My question is, would someone come to you would you be a family practitioner, or do you have to get a referral to come to you first?
No, we don't need a referral.
No.
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 I think only CDPHP Plan C, you can get a referral for 2 or 3 acupunctures. I wasn't aware of Blue Cross Blue Shield allowing it.
I have a consent form that says you should see your MD about what you're coming for, just for diagnosis and to make sure you cover all your bases to be as safe as possible.
How many people are sent to you by MDs?
I have a few MDs that send people to me, a few chiropractors. I have a couple doctors, 1 or 2 surgeons send people to me. But I'd say 5%. And even most of those people, the surgeons, the doctors, they send them to me last.
Right.
They'll try drugs, they'll try a shot. Maybe they're at the point where they say surgery is your only option, and the patient says, what else can I try? And they'll say, well, why don't you try acupuncture?
Interesting. So you're the last resort.
Would you say that happens to you too, Mike?
That happens a lot. I do try in the educational process of working with people, I try to help them understand how this can be a benefit to prevention. And so some people will realize that even when they're well, they should come in, even if it's monthly or seasonal or something like that. And in fact, in traditional China, people generally, even when they were healthy, would go in seasonally for their so-called tune-up.
What sort of things do you treat that might surprise people here, that they could go to you for some help with? And acupuncture, I think of pain, but is there anything?
Treat a lot of like women's health issues. The whole
you lose
range.
weight?
Lose weight?
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg brought up the stop smoking,
Right.
we call it substance abuse. So weight would be like helping a person if they're eating addicted isn't the right word, but just eat and can't control that. Eating disorder would be the proper word.
Anybody use hypnotism? Is that a valid medical technique in any way now? Do you know?
I think it is. I don't use it. I have somebody in my office I work with that uses it, but I don't. But
Actually, there is a...
We've got some more questions, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just wanted to mention something here as a part of the question, and I think maybe should be said, is that, you know, these are whole different medical systems. And of course, as Greg said very well, acupuncture is only one of the tools. That's what's licensed. But the whole medical system is what you're encountering when you do these things. And it's like different languages. Sometimes some things are said better in one language than another language, and it's sometimes hard to do a word-for-word translation. So when we talk about curing, that doesn't have any meaning, really, in some respects. We talk about promoting healing process, keeping things in balance. I think it's really important to understand that when anybody's on the other end of the needle, that they're really impacted upon by a total system. And part of that system includes the needle. It also includes the thought process and the way you make sense of it, and the diet, what you eat and what you do, and all the other things. So I just think thought that needed to be put into the equation somehow.
No, there is no question about it that whenever you develop a sickness, it is usually your environment, your body, mind, soul, the way you are eating, your behaving, you're abusing your body or your mind, that brings on the sickness. And when you put all that together, then only you're going to heal. Without that, healing doesn't occur. So ancillary services, what we are talking about, it becomes a part of it. Wouldn't you say so?
I do. I would beg to differ a little bit with what you're saying, because I think, you know, alternative medicine, which I don't necessarily agree with that term either. Maybe the CAM, the complementary alternative medicine, is there a little closer. But, you know, healing, curing, true, it's semantics, but I think healing, curing, and in a way, maybe I agree with Dr. Patel in that healing is a much more profound sensation. And healing can come through any number of means, whether an acupuncture needle, a drug, a surgery, maybe not as easy as that, a supplement, an herb. But it's really it's something that becomes much more deep-rooted and could, I mean, if we were on the panel with the people talking about spirituality before,
Right.
we would start kind of talking the same language there too. But that was true, Dr. Weisberg said that Chinese medicine, for instance, is a different language, a different culture, a different mindset. And sometimes I struggle trying to translate that Chinese thinking when I'm trying to explain it, because I always do want to explain it to a person in English, because it doesn't always translate.
I don't go to my doctor for a tune-up, ever.
Yeah.
But, obviously, it's a different concept. Would you have participated in any of the other panels usefully, say the hormonal panel? Does acupuncture or herbal medicine have any application in treatment of menopause?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I treat women all the time. Probably 3/4 of my patients are women. And for every woman, there's something menstrually going on. I work with Albany IVF. I have them sending women to me to help increase their chances of fertility. Studies show there's almost a 40% increase in using acupuncture with assisted reproduction techniques. But, you know, it's just like Western medicine. Will it work? We don't know till they come in. I had a woman come to me that has endometriosis, burning, pain, constantly. She's been on the pills. They've given her hormones, estrogen. They're about to take her uterus out and do a hysterectomy. And now she's off the pills. She still has pain, but it's not constant. And, you know, will it work? I don't know until they come in. It's hard. The difficult thing we have to deal with is people getting their mindset and taking care of themselves because insurance isn't covering it right now. So they have to make an investment in their own health. And the mindset is if the insurance doesn't pay for it, I don't want to do it sometimes. So it makes it difficult.
Well, I think some of that too is if the insurance won't pay for it, maybe it's not real. Maybe these people think it's, there's some validation in an insurance company paying for a procedure, is I think what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think there is a movement going on that these CAM services will be included.
You'd have been useful, I think, on the sleep panel. I would imagine you all deal with sleep disorders successfully.
Mm-hmm.